being joined by Awotoye is an AI researcher and data management specialist. Great to have you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning, Laddie. Thank you for having me here.
So we see the rise of AI, that's changing everyday human activity. Would you describe this as a positive trend still? At this point, we've seen the likes of the CEO of NVIDIA, keep touting the potential benefits we all stand to gain, but there are also fears at this point. Are you seeing any negative trends?
First, I will say on the net, it's positive. It's positive because it offers us a lot of great advantages compared to leaving it behind. It helps us do more. On the negative, when you look at the ethical side and you look at things around capturing every single diverse aspect of human lives, then I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. But on the whole, I think it's positive, and it can only be negative for people who choose not to get on the bandwagon.
Right, and why do you think people, many people remain fearful about the emergence of AI?
Definitely, there is this uncertainty about jobs. People think, oh, AI is going to take my job. There are concerns about misinformation. There are concerns about deepfakes and, AI getting into the hands of the wrong people. And these concerns are real. However, when used correctly, I think AI will help us beat a lot of the limitations that we experience right now as humans. So yes, the fears are there, but then with proper governance in place, we can always overcome.
And talking about fears, I've seen myself, a video of myself on social media, marketing some product that I did not have any hand in, and definitely that was AI. And AI, spoke like me, and definitely I was afraid, when I saw what AI could do there. But there's some reports that suggest, AI could create as many as 230 million jobs, in sub-Saharan Africa. Does this challenge the belief that AI will, simply take away jobs?
I really don't believe AI will take away jobs, Laddie. If we look at the introduction of computers when they replaced typewriters, everybody thought typists will become obsolete and will become jobless. However, those typists who decided to learn about word processing, spreadsheets, and all these things, who learned such on time, were able to do more with their lives than they did when they were typists. Also, the introduction of computers helped you and I do more things that we would probably need to walk down the street to look for a typist to do for us. Now you can type a letter on your phone while being driven to the office and get the letter already printed. You don't need a typist to help you. So in the same way, I believe AI, when embraced, will help more people do more things. For instance, right now with AI, some people are able to get emergency diagnosis of whatever is happening to them, even in remote areas where they don't have access to any clinician. So I think AI will do more on the long run, and in that way, it will create more jobs. But you might see it as taking away jobs. I see it as creating more opportunities for us.
All right, let's look at it from a continent's eye view now. Africa's AI market is growing quickly. Yet only about 5% of talent, have reliable compute access. How does this infrastructure gap, affect fair development across the continent? We import a lot of things. At some point, I hope we don't have to always import AI.
Well, unfortunately, right now, we still have to import some AI compute resources because I'm not aware that we have all the compute capabilities that we will need on the continent. So we have to face the stark reality that we might be a little bit behind, or we are behind. That said, I feel if we work together and especially, I'm just thinking public-private investments and partnerships, we can use those, we can explore the opportunities and build something for ourselves. People will likely not build it for us. We have to build these things ourselves.
So what advice would you give, organizations that still don't know how, what to do to kick off, AI initiatives?
So, very good question, Ladi. I think, and this, you'll find that a lot of organizations are really afraid that their next AI initiative might just be another failed tech project. I would say AI is a little bit different from the regular tech project. So if you handle it the way you've been handling your regular tech projects, you might miss it. And for organizations starting, I would say don't try to do everything at once. Don't try to implement AI in the entire organization at once. That is a recipe for failure, and it's like trying to boil the Atlantic Ocean. I would suggest they sit with AI experts, and just to let you know, several AI consultancy firms right now offer companies like these the free forward deployed engineer services. Forward deployed engineers are basically AI specialists who come into the organization, sit with the business, understand the business process, and help them identify low-hanging fruits where AI can make a difference. And with these, the organization can do their business case and decide, hey, looking at the implementation costs, the ongoing running costs, will this work for our bottom line? Will this improve KPIs? If the answer is an affirmative yes, then you want to work with these guys to deploy AI in these areas. So I think that's a good way to start. And even before deploying, after identifying this low-hanging fruit, before deploying, I think it's very relevant for organizations to do a readiness assessment. Let them check, are we ready in terms of data? Do we have the right data we need? Are we ready from a cultural perspective? Are the people going to resist this? Are we going to experience pockets of resistance from different departments if we try to implement this? We have to get those fixed before we try to implement AI. And I believe strongly that more work has to be done from a change perspective, change management perspective, than from a technology perspective.
Right, and definitely with the cost of living issues, among most African countries at this point, we're seeing businesses, they're trying to, cut costs, to improve profitability, and workers trying to get more, advances, when it comes to, incomes and all of that. How expensive is, AI adoption? Given Nigeria's unpredictable, challenging economic climate, do you see, businesses making a smooth transition, when some of them are just, trying to cut away as much cost at this time?
I strongly believe that the economic issues you've just described are not common to Nigeria alone. Nigeria just has a different flavor of economic issues. And that said, I believe these companies can make very smooth transitions. One mistake I see a lot of companies making is that they just jump on the large language models, but they could start low, try to use the small language models, use those and try them first before getting onto the large language models. And also they could have deals with the cloud service providers and try to find ways of cutting down capex or locking the contracts in the local currency instead of the dollar due to the currency exchange fluctuations. And this is coming, this kind of view is coming because we really don't have a lot of data centers in Africa right now to power some AI solutions. So I think they should also expect uneven uptake, but with working on targeted projects, targeted pilots, for instance, areas like customer services, fraud detection, and there are other areas that will immediately benefit from the implementation of AI, and they will see immediate returns. So yes to your question.
All right, so, writing on you did mention data centers. At this point, we've been talking a lot about the rise of data centers in, most developed nations, at this point. For an investor, with a lot of cash, looking for where to invest, talk to me about what it takes to start off a data center and what the earning potential is like.
So starting up a data center, obviously there is the aspect of construction that we have to look into. And one of the biggest challenges I've seen or read about for data centers, which they need to overcome, has to do with cooling the data centers. So whatever method they want to use to cool, I think that's going to be a big challenge to overcome. I know in some areas in the US, we've had people protesting because they needed a lot of fresh water to cool the data centers, and that is taking water away from the city's water supply. So that is one major challenge people have to overcome. But looking at Africa, I believe the concept of data center is still more or less a greenfield. So on the long run, anybody investing massively in data centers in Africa right now will eventually get the first mover advantage. So I would say there are some gains. And like any investment, you would have a rough ride. You may have rough rides here and there, but I think they are all things that can be overcome.
And maybe when the ride, gets smooth, after investment, could you 10x or 20x your investment? Is there potential there?
There is great potential, a lot, because don't forget that everybody has to rely on these data centers and the backbones. And I have read about some companies quietly cashing in on data centers. Even OpenAI, they recently had to sign a deal with Oracle to make use of Oracle's data centers to power some of their solutions. So there is a long-term profitability in that. And in fact, we could even see that as another new export. We situate the data centers here in Africa, and data that is not controlled in the West can sit here. Of course, there are controlled data that will never leave the West, but then we can have our data centers in Africa and have Western data sitting there in addition to our data. And I want to believe the cost of running a data center on our side of the continent or on our side of the world will be cheaper than running it in the West.
All right, well, definitely keep tracking those investments there. But from your experience, is there real potential for nurturing local AI talents in Nigeria? And how tough is it to build teams that can compete globally?
So I think it's possible, very possible, to build local teams that can compete globally. And Nigerians are doing big things around the world. So I will say that we just need to invest more in capacity building and probably get more compute power into the hands of the people who are grooming. I see the cost of compute might be a reason why we will not have people who are both technically savvy and experienced. So I think it's possible to groom people. We just need to push more money into that area.
And education and awareness remain limited, according to reports. Compared to the rest of the world, where is Africa, in terms of AI adoption, and how can the continent catch up? Because it seems we're behind a lot.
Yeah, so I think the continent is behind. That's real. That's true. And I also strongly believe we probably need to do a lot of public-private private sector partnerships. Now, one thing I want to bring to your attention, Ladi, is that if we look at 2024, Alphabet spent over $49 billion on research and development alone. On the other hand, the entire Nigerian budget at a baseline of 750 was somewhere around 32 billion. And that shows the gap. So the Western world, they have the funds to throw into research. I don't know that we have the funds, or I don't know that we're channeling the funds in that direction if we do have it. However, I believe we can check out the directions that these research funders are moving, and we can also move fast in that direction and possibly outpace them. So we probably don't have the money for the research, but we know their research is determining where they go, and we can go in that direction. You might call it blind movement, but I feel it might be better than just sitting back and doing nothing. That's a way we can catch up. And we can also think of globalizing our local talents, which means they sit down in Africa, but then they serve global audiences, they serve global clients, and that will also help us earn a lot of foreign exchange. So I think these are ways we can attempt or try to catch up. But that's, that's the way I see it right now.
We're trying to attract a lot of dollars into the continent at this point. But are there innovative solutions AI engineers are embedding into systems to improve, accuracy, efficiency, and resilience against manipulation? Because we know with technology, there's that big risk of manipulation.
Yeah, there are so many guardrails that can be put in place to work against manipulation, and even the big AI vendors have also built these guardrails in their systems. So I would say there are, and efficiency, AI systems are working faster. Right now, they are less resource hungry than they used to be. And we are also teaching them to focus on what is important. And talking about efficiency, there are situations where you don't really need a large language model, where you can make do with a small language model, and you will get acceptable output. So I will say those are areas that engineers are currently looking into. And I heard the CEO of NVIDIA said recently that small language models might be the future. And I want to believe this has to do with cost. So those are there. And of course, when you talk of accuracy still has to do with the data. How good is your data? How well was the data labeled? And these are things that engineers are doing to improve the accuracy of AI implementations for organizations generally.
All right, and you did mention the big boys there, like NVIDIA, but as global tech giants invest heavily in African AI hubs, how can local startups avoid being sidelined and instead become key drivers of growth?
Oh, good question. So one way to avoid being sidelined is to own what I would call the last mile aspect of the value chain, of the AI value chain. For instance, the big giants will not label our local data better than we will. The big giants will not understand our local cultures better than we will. So, and these things are very relevant to train AI models. So I will say that's one way for local players to really be on top of their game. Another thing I can think of off the fly is that the local players can be granted exclusive access to data, like government data, like data generated by government agencies. The government could work with the local players in their respective countries, for instance, in Nigeria, so that the local players are the only one who has access to this government data, and possibly mandate that this data can only sit on the data centers of the local players. That way, the guys will be forced to collaborate with the government, with the local players to train their models and to even make use of our infrastructure. So I think there are a couple of ways we can go about doing that to ensure that the local players are not being sidelined.
All right, definitely we need to, protect the local players at this point. But thank you so much for helping us unpack this. Fiyinfolu Awotoye is an AI researcher and a data management specialist. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Ladi, for having me. It's a pleasure.